Hi guys, welcome to Akhil's channel. He would be doing the intro right now, but I'm the one holding the mic, so.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Disha. Here you go.
Disha, I don't think anybody has ever seen you on my channel before, have they?
No.
This is your first time. I promise I'm not hiding you or anything like that.
Well, you were the first person introduced on my podcast. You're in the pilot episode.
Well, I mean, let's just pretend like this is the very first official episode of Akhil Nova's secret podcast that I never told you about. All right? No, but seriously though, guys, if I ever put out a podcast, you would be the very first guest. I swear to God. I swear to God, it was already planned, even though I don't have a name for it or anything. I have a very special guest, as you know. Her name is Disha, all right? And she has an incredible podcast. It's called But What Will People Say? And I have her here on this channel for this specific video, mainly because she's a content creator. And I wanted her to share her story, her journey, and also maybe give you guys some motivational pieces of advice for you guys who might be in a rut at the moment, or if you're thinking about starting a podcast or a YouTube channel or anything related to content creating. So, Disha, thank you for being on my video.
Yay, thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely. No, I love you. And now, real quick, you could hold the mic. Just tell people a little bit about yourself and what you do. What's your content?
So I host a podcast called But What Will People Say? And it's about South Asian interracial relationships, dating, all things what will people say. Do I look at the camera when I say this?
Nah, you talk to me, girl.
Okay. So yeah, it's a podcast. It's been out almost for a year.
Yeah, it's hard to believe, honestly.
Yeah, it kind of came out of nowhere. Someone else pointed it out to me, like someone who listens.
And then you hopped on the call with me and you told me.
Right.
You're like, by the way, it's almost a year. I was like, holy shit, dude.
Yeah, that passed by very quickly. And it's a weekly podcast, so I feel like I was so in that cycle of like every Tuesday we put out an episode, and so that's just what I've been focused on, and before I knew it, it was almost a year.
Jesus Christ. Where do you find like the fact that, first, pat yourself on the back because you were able to put out an episode literally every week since you've started.
Yeah, I took 2 months off. I took a month off in April when like COVID started because like shit was just weird. And then I took a month off in August just because I feel like that's vacation time and I needed a bit of a break, and I revamped a little bit on the podcast. So,
I mean, for somebody like me who always has commitment issues, right? It's like
as so many men do.
Hey, I don't fall into this category, by the way. All right. I am a specific type of man. All right. I stay committed to all of my things. All right. I stayed committed to my barber for 6 years now. What does that mean?
That's commitment.
That's commitment. All right. For all those times that he's gone to the DR, all right, Dominican Republic, left me in the cold, with bushy hair for a month, and I stayed loyal.
How frequently do you get your hair cut?
Believe it or not, think about this. Since junior year of college, I have been going to him every single week.
Every week?
I've been going to him every single week. It was only until COVID where, because I was forced to stay in my house and I couldn't go out anyway, I was like, all right, this might be the start of my life where I actually take 2 weeks instead of 1 week. Right now, I'm going on about like 3 weeks right now without a haircut. And it's pretty new, but I'm happy because I saved a lot of money.
That's commitment. See, like a weekly haircut, like that's just time I don't have.
Now that's why with Miguel, shout out to Miguel, I go to him so often is because it's literally 15 minutes, yo. I call him and I'm like, yo, Miguel, you free? He's like, yeah, I got somebody right now, but get here at 4:30. I get there at 4:30. By 4:45, I'm out. $20 flat.
Well, I guess in like a week.
With tip.
How much hair can you possibly grow back?
It's not even that. It's not the top hair that you might be thinking about. It's more so like fixing the beard, because I don't do my own beard. It's mostly the shape up. It's mostly like re-edging this stuff, fading it out and stuff like that. But that's the thing though. But what is that though? Is that insecurity? Is that me being overly, conscious of my looks or so self-conscious? Is me wanting to always look at my best? That's what I thought about, is like, it could be When COVID hit, it was more of a testament to see like, all right, I think this is pure confidence, Akil, is you not giving an F about your hairstyle. You know what I mean? You look fine, you know?
I mean, I don't think so. I think it's okay to take care of yourself. I feel like most dudes don't anyway. But like, I get my nails done every like 3 weeks.
Ooh, that's a lot. That's a lot. And then I swear to God, I feel like you'd be the type to put black every single time.
Actually, no. My nail lady was shocked because I always get like sparkle. Like glitter is my favorite color.
Yeah.
And she was like, just black? And I'm like, yeah, I don't really want. She literally brought like 4 other colors with her because she was like, what do you mean just black? I'm like, I don't know. I feel like it could be classy. I don't know.
But a lot of girls do black though.
And
right?
A lot of girls do neutral, so like pinks and whites and like beiges. I feel like is pretty.
Oh, but they don't do like the ombres and all the fancy
Yeah.
schmancy stuff.
It depends on my mood.
Got it. Now the question I want to ask regarding the podcast thing is commitment issues, right? I have commitment issues. Like I'm the type of person where, you know, when I have an idea, I hop on it and I'm really all in 150%. But then I'll tell myself or I'll tell the people like, oh, I'm going to put out an episode every Wednesday. And then once I make that commitment, it falls apart by like the 3rd week. So tell the camera, it doesn't matter. How have you stayed committed every single week? What was your strategy? What was your plan as to why you were able to still put out an episode every week for an entire year? Because that really is something to be proud of.
Yeah. So I guess, see, I'm the opposite of you. I don't just like hop into every idea I have because I'm my own worst enemy where I'm like, oh, you have an idea? Here's every reason it's not going to work. So most of my ideas I don't even do anything about. And this one I was like,
why are you so pessimistic, yo?
I'm not pessimistic. I'm realistic. There's a difference.
That is
But
true.
so when I finally came up with the idea for this podcast, I couldn't come up with enough reasons for why it shouldn't exist. So I was like, all right, I can do this. So then like I messaged you because I was like, I don't know anything about podcasting, help, because you're the only person I knew who had one. And then my other thing is I read like way too many self-help books.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that always comes up is success is just a matter of doing something consistently. Like,
Correct.
if you're not doing something consistently, it's not going to be a success. You can spend all your money on marketing or branding or, you know, having great whatever. But if you're not consistently producing something, consistently doing what you have to do, then it's not going to go anywhere. And like when you look at all these like really big, really successful people, like they have been consistently doing something just like forever.
Literally forever.
They didn't stop. And when you think about it, like half the competition is fading out just because they stop. Like
Agreed.
pod fade is a thing. I think it's like 90% of podcasts like don't last more than 10 episodes. Like you're already in the top 10% if you make it past that.
I mean, I 100% agree with you. It's that when you look at people that are famous, they've been doing it for 5 years, 10 years, and they've just been putting it out every single week, or they've just been committed to what they're doing, right?
Right.
You know, but that's the thing, though, is like, I think what viewers want, and you could agree or disagree to this, I think what viewers want in terms of them wanting to follow you and follow your journey is to know that you are 300% into your work. Like, they want you to be a robot. You know what I mean? They essentially want you to put out, like, they're a little selfish, right? Like, no, I feel like a lot of viewers and like a lot of the audience is selfish because they just want you to put out, if you say you're going to put out a weekly thing, they would want you to put it out twice a week, 3 times a week. If you could put it out every single day, nonstop for 365 days for 5 years, oh my God, that's the best. I would definitely follow you because I know you are heavily devoted to your craft. And it's like viewers kind of want you to like put your entire life into your work
So
for them to be satisfied.
I think part of it is just like if you say you're gonna do something, you have to do it. And like part of building a relationship, especially with like an audience where like these people don't know who you are. So like all they have is your word to go off of.
Trust.
So if you say you're gonna put out an episode every week, like you gotta show up because if they realize, oh, like he's not really posting every week, he says he's going to, then whatever, maybe your first video caught their attention, but then afterwards, if you're not delivering, then they're going to find someone else who is delivering on what they're saying they're going to do.
Right.
And then eventually you hit a point where if I said something like, oh, I missed 1 week that I was supposed to post, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to put out 2 episodes the next week to make up for it. I didn't, and then I got DMs about it.
Really?
So
People are
now
hitting you up?
I'm being held accountable by my audience.
That's amazing, though. I like that.
Yeah, so in the beginning, it was me holding myself accountable, but now I have, like, a certain level of an audience, no matter how small that is, relying on me to deliver. And so unless I give a heads up that, like, hey, I'm not posting this month, like, I have gotten DMs like, hey, like, you said you were going to post another episode this week, just wondering.
Where you at?
Yeah, like, so what happened? And I'm like, I just didn't.
Which is a really good thing because, like you said, well, especially for me, I'm going to fall out eventually. And that's a shitty thing to say for myself. That's a pessimistic thing to say. But for you, in your logic, that's realistic, right?
No, that's not realistic. That's you quitting.
That's why I have you on the. That's why I have you on the episode, is to give me motivation. But if I had people that, I think that's the reason why I got right back into Akhil Nova, like that channel, is because I was doing something, and then I was putting out like a video or two. I put out like 3 videos, and then I stopped for like 3 weeks, and there was like a girl, I forgot her name, but I'll put her in the bottom of this video. But she was like, where you at? Like, what the fuck? Like, I liked your videos. Why'd you stop? And I was like, oh shit, like that's motivation to me to go back in, because I'm putting all this stuff out and I'm not getting any feedback of people saying like, oh, I like your stuff. Oh, where you at? You know, it's kind of just me on my own. So it's really dope to have somebody or have a few people and have a real audience, real fans that are like, yo, Disha, where the fuck you at? I had a routine with you.
Yeah, so I think part of it is also like, it's not just consistently putting out content, it's creating a community around it.
Correct.
So, like, the people who reach out to me aren't like nobody at that point. Like they've already, most people will follow me on Instagram if they like the podcast. And so they'll slide into my DMs just to say like, hey, like loved your podcast, or, you know, I really appreciated what you said, or whatever it is. And so over time, they have just become people I interact with. Like my audience, I'm very engaged with. Right. Like when they comment on anything I post or they DM me, like I may not be great at getting back to DMs immediately, but I do get back to them. Right. And so over time, I have built this whole community, and that is, you know, slowly growing and in this network of people that I know. And so that's where the other part comes in. Like you can't just like post and then turn off. Right. Because there's lots of people, and the word gets around when you become a creator who isn't engaged with their audience. Where like, oh, like they just put out videos, but like if you comment, they'll never like acknowledge that you exist.
The word gets around, and that'll ruin, like that'll completely destroy the trust and reliance that they have on you as this podcast creator.
Pretty much, and I feel like with social media, like creators and like anyone who's like out there is so accessible that like people almost, and that's where I guess you could say the audience can be a little bit selfish, where like they expect you to be accessible. Right. Like if they DM you, like they would like a response. And sometimes people are like shocked that I either respond, or like if they ask me a question, I like will answer it. And they're like, oh my God, like I don't even know you. Like you're so nice. Like you didn't have to give an explanation at all. Right. But, and like in my head, I'm not aiming to impress anybody. I'm like, you asked me a question, I'm answering it. I'm sorry, it took like 3 days. But I
mean, you're basically a celebrity to them. And I think America has this not false, but we have like this belief that celebrities are like too busy for us and they're too cool for us. So when you reach out to someone that you admire, like when an individual reaches out to you that they admire, and then you respond back, it's kind of like, oh shit, like she's human. She's just like us. You know what I mean? Yet I watch this girl I listen to this girl every single week, you know? Now, people don't know, but obviously your podcast is called.
But what would people say?
Now, where did that idea come from? Because it's basically you sitting down with South Asian women and giving them not motivation, but kind of giving them your example of you dating interracially to give them the hope, or I guess the motivation to be able to do the same within their family.
So most of
explain it better. I explained it in a shitty way.
So most of my guests, really the point of the podcast is to share the stories of other people who have done what I've done. So the pilot is my story, but all the other episodes are men and women who have decided to, you know, date outside of South Asian culture, whether it be as simple as a different caste, a different religion, a different race, and their stories and their experiences, because I feel like what gets lost in like the Spark Notes version of like, oh, my boyfriend was a secret, my parents flipped out, eventually they got over it, now we're married. That's like the short version. But like for most people, there's a lot of like nuance and gray area, and there's a lot of different factors that make each experience very different.
Right.
And so when people tune in, there's things they can relate to, and then there's some things that they can't relate to, but it gives them a different perspective or maybe reframes their situation, because we have a lot of like younger listeners that like, you know, they haven't told their families who they're dating or who they're with, or
Or they're probably not even dating at all because they're
Right.
scared to tell their parents.
exactly. We have lots of like dating episodes where it's just like talking about like reframing what dating is, because I feel like South Asian culture is so conservative, where it's like you're dating for a purpose, like you're dating to get married, where really you don't have to.
Your mantras, or what the message you're trying to send to your audience is that you're not dating like how ethnic families or what did you say, conservative? No, conservative families. You're dating for a purpose, but in American culture, we're dating to gain experience in the world of dating. You know, to eventually try to find, you know, the person that we want to be with.
Yeah, exactly. And like we weren't raised in a culture of dating. We're raised in a world of arranged marriages. So like it's not like our parents raised us giving us like dating advice or how to deal with a breakup or any of these things. So for some of our listeners, like it's just like feeling like they're not alone. Like
Right.
they're not the only one going through this, or like how do I date someone, or how do I deal with this situation, or you know, my partner doesn't understand my culture, or whatever the situation is. We have older guests who have kids and families, and then that whole situation comes in of raising like mixed babies, kids that are American, and what does it mean to be American, and how do you bring the South Asian or Indian or whatever part into it. So it's a lot.
No, it really is a lot. But the thing is, you started from zero at some point, exactly a year ago. Now, the thing is, I'm sure that a lot of people that are watching this are content creators themselves. They're either podcasters, they're probably YouTubers, filmmakers. But the one commonality that we all have is that we all started from zero. Now, how did you build that community that you have now that's so tight? You have a tight fan base. You have an audience that really, like, they feel like they're connected to you. You know, you're giving them episodes every single week, and you're sharing your story, then you're sharing other people's story, it's just you talking on a podcast for an hour. It's kind of like Joe Rogan, you know? He's talking to new people every time, but it feels like I get to know him a little bit more every episode. Now, my question is, how did you build that community to get to the point that you are right now? Was there a specific strategy? Was it, like you said earlier, just commitment? Or you did mention it was like Facebook part of it too?
Yeah, so I think one tool that really any creator can use, because I feel like most creators do have like a target audience. So there are so many Facebook groups. It's probably the only reason I have Facebook anymore, because I hate Facebook. But you know, there's so many groups of just like people who have like things in common, and I feel like that's what podcasts are, right? Like most podcasts are very niche. Like, oh, I really like motorcycles, this is my motorcycle podcast. Oh, I really like gardening, this is my gardening podcast. And in the same way, there are Facebook groups for these things, for gardening and motorcycles, and for me, women in interracial relationships, South Asian women and specifically.
Right.
And so that was the Facebook group I was in. There were not many of us. I think it was like less than 1,000 girls at the time.
God damn. And these are all like, we're talking less than 1,000, but they're all active?
More or less. I mean, everyone goes to the group for some level of support or resource, or just, you know, be the fly on the wall and read other people's stories and feel better about it. Because a lot of girls will post where that's the only safe place they have to post, like a picture of them and their boyfriend or whoever they're dating, because they can't post it on their profile picture or on Instagram because, God forbid, their family members see it, things like that. Or just they're looking for advice. Oh, how do we pick a baby name? Do we pick an American name? Do we pick an Indian name? Or
religion.
Right, religion. Or, oh, I don't know how to tell my parents. There's lots of people who have been disowned. There's a lot of that. So there's just a lot of things to sort through. And so that's originally where the podcast idea came from, because I was like, all of us have this one thing in common, right? Our partners are not brown. But then every single person posting in here has different stories, different experiences that, like, I thought, oh, well, it's just one story, when really there's like hundreds of them.
Mm-hmm.
And people find things they relate to and they don't. And so I thought, there's nowhere else besides this group to find other people who can relate to what I'm going through.
Right.
And when I was dating Mike, there was nothing, because that group came about like probably less than a year before I started the podcast. really small. If you looked up like interracial dating or South Asian relationships, you got like Dill Mill.
Oh, we're talking about apps.
Yeah, you got, really nothing.
Domo is the biggest one.
Yeah, and there was nothing. And so that's kind of where I hit, where I was like, this might be a good idea for a podcast, because when I looked it up, I was like, I have no competition. That's part of it, right? You have no competition. But also, like, this is a resource that nobody has. Like, what is making you different from everyone else? Even if you do have competition, right? I'm not the only brown podcaster. I'm not the only one talking about taboo topics, but what's the difference between me and the other people? And like you said, I have a very long form podcast. It's not very heavily edited. I give my guests the, space to speak freely and not just label them for whatever highlight their story is. Because there, a lot of podcasts nowadays are very heavily produced. There's, mostly like sound bites and short clips of longer interviews that have been edited down, and they're jumping from topic to topic.
Right.
Whereas mine is like, this is my one guest, this is their whole story, and now we're just going to talk about it.
Right. Does content creating ever get stressful for you? And how do you manage do you ever have like breakdowns for yourself?
I don't think I have breakdowns per se, because I realize I like genuinely really enjoy doing this, but I do put a lot of pressure on myself. So sometimes I have to like take a step back and like, whoa, like relax. But I think what helps me, like knowing what stresses me out and then like mitigating for that. So like I have like episodes up the wazoo in the pipeline. So I'll spend like a month where all I do is record every weekend. When I launched this podcast, I was recording 2 or 3 episodes every weekend for like 3 months. So
to have it in the back burner.
By Christmas, I had episodes till like May or June lined up. Jeez. Whereas if I just did jack shit for the rest of the time, I was like, I got hours of audio. I just have to like edit it and put it out there.
Would you say, this is advice for me, would you say this could probably be kind of a factor to you having that commitment for a year, is that you were able to put out an episode every single week because you had stuff in the back burner and you put overtime into 1 week or a couple weekends so that you were good for whenever you might get a little lazy or uninspired. Do you ever get lazy or uninspired or anything like that with the podcast?
Sometimes. It definitely happens. I think for me, so in the beginning when I launched the podcast, I made sure I had like an obscene amount of content, right? All right, we have like 6 months worth of content here. Now how do we make the podcast better? Now we find better guests. So there was like I'm constantly like shooting my shot to get guests on. Like I will DM anyone and their mother that I think would be a good guest. And trust me, I have been left on scene on Instagram. You could see like someone read your message, but they didn't respond, right? I've been left on scene so many times. It's like unbelievable.
We're talking about like just from guests.
Right. Like people who I reached out to, and dude, sometimes they're celebrities, sometimes they're just like big Instagram people. They came up on my Discover page, whatever. But then there's the people who do respond. And then it makes it more exciting because it was someone you reached out to, right? And so I may send out 30 DMs and only get like 2 responses, but those 2 responses are still exciting.
It's still 2 weeks of content.
Right, exactly. And sometimes like I do get stressed out, and then I'll post like stuff on my Instagram, and like, the people will respond. And the one piece of feedback I got was I had like a 2-hour-long episode, and I was like, this is really long, what do I do? And a lot of people didn't want me to shorten the episodes because they like listening. So a lot of people were like, why don't you just split it into 2 episodes? Like it gives you a break, and now you have 2 weeks of content for one guest. I'm like, oh, that's genius. I like never thought of that.
Does that work though? Because like you're saying that like this Saturday I could put out part 1, you would put out part 1, and then next Saturday's part 2?
Yeah. So I haven't had to do that yet because that was like a recent development. And now with like something shifting on my end, I'm trying to keep them much shorter, to like about an hour. Because I've also found people tend to tune in more when they notice a shorter episode, and they last longer. Like they're more willing to listen to it and not be discouraged by the length.
Right. Because
I'm the kind of person who loves long form podcasts. Like give me a 5-hour podcast and I will listen to it throughout the week, right? But most people don't usually last more than like 45 minutes to an hour. So I was like, you know what? If that's what most people want, then I'll try to just have shorter episodes. And it also forces me to stay on topic because I can get very, very sidetracked. Yeah.
Like our bonus episode.
Oh, yeah. Well, those
We
are
literally
more-
brought one dog into the crib, and then the entire shit it just went to shit.
Yeah, that was solely for us to sidetrack. And also, I feel like in the beginning, I put out a couple of those just so my listeners can get to know me. Because as I turn into the host, it becomes about my guest.
Right, exactly.
Right? And I like sprinkle, obviously, bits of my own bits and pieces of ideas in, but like there isn't really a chance where you get to feel like you're hanging out with me. So
Right.
I threw in a couple of like the just for fun episodes for that reason. And then I stopped doing it because I'm like, all right, now you guys have enough of me. And you also have my Instagram because
Yeah,
I
that
don't
is true,
have
yeah.
a separate podcast Instagram.
You've been
It's
doing,
just
like
mine.
those Instagram reels and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. You busy now. You busy. I mean, and I like those bonus episodes because it kind of gives like those unfiltered. It's not serious.
Right.
You know, like
So
you had a
right,
dog
listen.
barking in the background. Like I was playing with the tarot cards, and you know what I mean. So it was pretty fun. Now, now going back to the 2-hour episodes, the fact that your fans are willing to listen to a 2-hour episode lets you know that they're hardcore fans. Like they're in this. You know what I mean? Because you know when you have a true fan base when you could put out episodes like Joe Rogan where he puts out 3-hour episodes and I would listen and be like, I wanted more. You know what I mean? And I think you got there, which is why it's so incredible that you've literally built up this community from ground up.
Pretty much. But you have to give people a map. So, like, when I do have longer episodes, like, I will put timestamps in where, like, these are the
How do you do that for
topics I
podcasts?
cover. So, like, the 15-minute mark, we talk about this. The 20-minute mark, we talk about this. The 30-minute. So, like, sometimes people would tune in, but they only want to hear about certain things you talk about.
Oh, you say it in the podcast in the beginning?
No, I put it in the show notes.
Oh, okay, got it.
So when you read the description
That
at the
helps a lot.
bottom, it'll say you can just fast forward to this time. That's what we talk about.
That helps out a lot. Now, do you have inspirations? Has anybody inspired you into starting a podcast? You know, and
You, Akhil.
cut this goddamn video, man. Too much gassing, too much sugarcoating. I don't like it. Be real, all right? I'm gonna ask this question one more time, Disha.
All right.
I want a serious answer. All right. Now, because I only ask inspiration because you could have done YouTube. You don't like doing the video stuff, from what you've told me. You don't do like Instagram Live type of format. You do podcast specifically. So it's a 2-part question. Do you have any inspirations, and why podcast as opposed to the other type of formatting that you could use for content creating?
Well, I'm good at talking. I have very few skills, but
You do talk a lot.
I can talk forever. So I was like, podcasts. And I also
Duh.
listen to so many.
True.
So I feel like a lot of people I know that started podcasts, it's like, well, they listen to so many, they start to think they can have their own. And that's what
Story of my life.
Right, like
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
listened to so many, I was like, I can do this. I can talk. So,
Give me some examples of podcasts that have inspired you.
obviously Joe Rogan. I mean, that was the original format that I followed, where it was like, quick intro, here's the show, barely edited, outro. Like, that was it. Now it's a little bit more produced, but still more or less the same. And then I love like Freakonomics, but they're much more produced and high end.
Because they got like the songs and like the music in their background music and all that.
And I mean, if you look at how much these people pay for licensing rights, I mean, it's like thousands of dollars a month.
Really?
Yeah,
Holy
especially
shit.
if they use like a pop song or like, you know, something you've heard on the radio by an artist. Like, forget it, you're paying for years.
Yeah.
And I also just felt like podcasting is one of those markets that just is like right on the brink of like really being like lucrative, and you don't have a lot of competition. Because I think with YouTube, like, I like read a stat the other day where like every minute it's like 500,000 hours of content is uploaded
Being consumed. It's being uploaded.
to YouTube. Meanwhile, in podcasting right now, there are less than 1 million active podcasts.
Interesting.
Like, you have less than I think it's like 600,000 or 800,000, which is like nothing compared to like how many YouTube channels there are. Because when you look at a lot of these really successful content creators, these are kids who started back in like 2010, 2008, when nobody really knew what YouTube was, no one knew what was going on. They were making videos on their cell phones for fun. And they've been doing it now for a decade, and they're successful, right? And now your competition isn't random people with their cell phone. It's networks, it's professionals, it's celebrities, it's brands. Whereas in the podcast world is still kind of this like no man's land of just like people.
I mean, starting though. You have networks coming in, like Freakonomics is a good example.
Yeah, there's definitely networks coming in, but I feel like if you can get in early enough and you can consistently do it, you have a slightly better chance of being heard.
Right.
And we're also, it's only coming up really in the US and like the UK. The rest of the
podcasting
world is still like dabbling. And so I have talked to like podcasters in other countries where they're like, they don't even have like professional networks yet. And I'm like, oh, you don't? Hi. Nice to meet you. And like, you know, there's so much you can do with it and there's so much potential. So that was part of it. And I guess like the cheesy side, I used to work drive-thrus when I was in like high school. I worked at like McDonald's drive-thru, Dunkin' Donuts, like whatever like random job I had. And the weirdest thing I would always get was compliments on my voice. Like frequently, like people would be like, this is the best drive-thru experience I've ever had. Like you should have a radio show. Like, or you should be like, you know, you have a great voice for radio. And so in the back of my head, I'm like, well, some randos think I sound good. So like maybe more randos.
This might mean something.
Maybe.
Might make something out of this.
Right, exactly. So I was like, I mean, somebody thinks I'd be good at this.
That's fucking great. Now, we gotta wrap it up because it's getting dark. Can you see us? Dude, you are a walking legend. Give me an autograph now so that if I ever go broke in the future, I could just sell it on Amazon and make a couple $1,000s. All right. Now, obviously, you know, a lot of the people watching are YouTubers themselves or podcasters or content creators or whatever it is that you guys do with the camera. All right. Now, what advice would you give as Disha, the content creator, the host of But What Will People Say? What advice would you give to people that are just starting out? We'll start with that actually. We'll do like a part series for this question. What advice would you give for people that are just starting out in content creating or thinking about starting to create some content?
Do it because you love it, because lots of people will think they can pay you an exposure if you think this is going to be your job. So that's the realist in me. If you genuinely love it, do it, and do it consistently. If you want it to be a success, just do it consistently.
Beautiful, short answer. I love it. Now, the only other question I have that piggybacks off of that is what advice would you give to people that are creating content and have been creating content, but feel like they're in a rut and they feel like, you know, there are moments or months that they feel uninspired, and they feel like they're kind of in the trenches and not moving? Well, what advice would you give to those people?
Go back to what excited you about starting it in the first place, and then try to figure out how to generate more of that excitement. Like, were you doing it because you love talking to new people? Were you doing it because you love the community you were trying to build? Were you doing it because you love talking about something? I know a guy who has like I think it's a Tesla podcast, and like super low production, like in his house, like little mic that he bought on Amazon, nothing crazy, but he's got like thousands of listeners because every week, not even every week, I think it's every day, all he does is talk about Tesla, and he loves it.
But he's passionate about it.
Right. So
and we could feel that passion.
Comes across. So you have to find what made you passionate about doing it.
Great answer. Now, have you ever felt like you were scared of judgment or anything like that? Have you ever felt like that before starting your podcast, or do you deal with that at all, or no?
Yeah, a little bit. I think I got past the judgment issue way back when I started. So I'm one of those people who had like her regular Instagram, and then I started like a second one, which was like my food blog.
Dishes by Dishes.
Dishes by Dishes, which is still what I use even for the podcast if you want to find me.
Which is smart.
And so the judgment really wore off when I made that account, and like people always judge you, right? Like, oh, you made a second Instagram account. Are you an influencer? Who do you think you are? Kind of thing. And so I had that for three or 4 years before I launched the podcast. 3 years, 2, I don't know. But so that cringe phase, I feel like passed very quickly because people just decided after a while, like, oh yeah, Disha just has this other account.
Right.
You know, and if you liked my content and you knew me, you could follow it. If you didn't, go to my personal account or just don't follow me anywhere. I don't care. Well, that's what it is, right? Like, you hit a point where you just don't care. You're like, I'm doing it because I enjoy it and I like it, and I really don't care what you think about it. Yeah. My whole tagline is live unapologetically, so that's just going.
Isn't that your bio?
It is in my
That's your Instagram bio, right?
It is. It's my tagline.
Well, and it also helps that you also have fans that are pushing you to say, like, hey, why'd you stop? You know, why do you feel, well, if you told them that you felt uninspired, they'll be like, why do you feel uninspired? We're here, we're watching you. You know, and that kind of gives you some kind of like, you know,
yeah,
puts a fire up your ass and then kind of gets you up. And
yeah, there's definitely external motivation now, but when you start it, and even when you're in a rut, it has to come from like inside. Like, you have to be internally motivated.
Yep. Yo, you are literally an inspiration for, I'm assuming,
really, like, gassing me up here.
I'm assuming now millions of South Asian women on the planet that are really looking up to you, man, because I told you this when you first started. You broke the boundary, or whatever you want to call it. You broke the boundary in your family to date outside of your race. Was that you? Mm-hmm. There you go. And so you broke the boundary. So not only did you inspire people within your family to be able to do that, because now their parents are looking at you and saying like, oh, well, all right, fine. It's okay now. Yeah, you could go date because, you know, Disha done it and we've accepted it somewhat. You know, we're like 80% of the way there. But you've inspired people, like you said, on the Facebook community, and then your fans who are across the world watching and listening to your podcast, and gaining that inspiration in themselves to be able to go out and go out into the dating world and be able to, you know, date people that they want to date and not think about always trying to please their damn parents.
Yeah. You know? Exactly.
And you should be very proud of that.
Thank you.
Now, before we head off, give your Instagram and where they can find you. And yeah, that's really it.
So you can find me on Instagram at Dishes by Dishes, spelled just like how it sounds.
I'll put it at the bottom.
That's it.
And then what's the podcast name again?
The podcast is called But What Will People Say, and you can find it on all major streaming platforms.
Thanks for watching. Peace. Say bye.
Bye.
Bye.